Hello, all, and welcome back to another episode of TV and Us, a conversation show about the TV series that we just can't stop talking about. My name is Jennifer Hahn.
And I'm Sarah Callan.
And each season, we focus on a different show, reviewing it episode by episode, and we invite you to watch along with us. Right now, we are reviewing The Bear Season 1, and today we are on Episode 7, titled Review. If you haven't watched it yet, this is your spoiler. Please check it out before continuing to listen to the rest of this episode. All right, Sarah, kick us off with an IMDb summary for Episode 7. This should kind of be an interesting one, especially the trend that the IMDb summaries matter-of-fact nature has followed up until now. So, pumped to hear what they've come up with today.
No, this perfectly follows the trend. Okay, the summary is: a bad day in the kitchen. Tensions rise.
Wow. We love things that are faithful to their brand, faithful to their trend. I think the sentences have gotten shorter, if anything.
Yes. Yeah. I think this is the shortest one so far.
Yes.
Like, by far. It's the shortest one.
Well, it's also kind of comical because it feels like such a matter-of-fact understatement of the feeling of this episode to just call it a bad day at the kitchen. You know, like IMDb, I see you with a little bit of sense of humor. Yeah. We also went from noun, verb, noun to just noun, verb. Tensions rise. We're just shaving off whole sections of the sentences.
The summary is 8 words long, and it's 2 sentences.
Yeah.
I really appreciate the brevity of this. And honestly, it's faithful to the episode. So, way to go.
Yes, it's so good. Okay, well, let's start off with our episode titles for Season 1, Episode 7. What was yours?
Mine is Black Hawk Down.
Nice. Oh my gosh. I love it. Well played.
It feels fitting.
Yes, it does feel fitting. My episode title is No Sharpie, No Good.
It's true. There is a whole arc just around this Sharpie situation.
Yes, indeed. And realistically, you could insert any small, insignificant object or detail into where it says Sharpie, no blank, no good. It could be anything. It could be anything. Because when you're in a state of chaos, any little thing will just tip you over the edge. Okay, well, man, this is going to be a fun conversation and a really interesting one because this episode is so interesting and so fascinating. So let's dive right in. The penultimate episode of The Bear Season 1, Episode 7. What were your thoughts about this one?
So when we first decided to review The Bear, there were a few episodes that I was really excited to talk about. And this is one of those. I love this episode for so many reasons. I think that it is just an encapsulation of everything that The Bear is. And we see the efficiency in the storytelling. We see its ability to create tension and stakes and then just keep re-upping the tension and stakes throughout. And also you see this knowledge of human nature and how we respond when we're stressed and what it's like to work in a team when everyone is at their worst in that moment and everything is going wrong. And so I love this episode. I also love that 18 of the 20 minutes are filmed in one continuous take to really make you feel like you are in that kitchen and you don't get a break from the stress, just like these characters aren't getting a break from the stress. Like, there's so much that I love about this episode that I think is just it. If I needed to pick one episode to help describe to somebody what The Bear is, I might pick this episode because it's just so indicative of the series as a whole, and it just encapsulates the show perfectly.
It really does. It really does. And yeah, on a thematic level, it really works. I think the placement of this episode is also really fascinating as the penultimate episode of this entire season. So I had a whole thought train that went down that path of like, man, they could have taken this approach in any of the episodes really throughout the season. I mean, I was thinking a lot about the True Detective season 1, smack dab in the center, episode 4, approach that also did like a fabulous like a one take sequence, and to create that sense of momentum and excitement and tension to carry you into the second half. And the fact that this happens in the second to last episode of the season is so interesting to me, because it feels like we've been growing and evolving and making progress with these characters for the last 6 episodes, and this one kind of just feels like everything has been stress tested. Like we have felt this feeling of growth and transformation with this crew, and this is how growth works sometimes, which is you think you're doing great and you've got it, and then shit hits the fan, and the million things coming at you at one time, you really get to stress test like, did we learn some things, and when things escalate, how do you handle situations like that? So I think it's a perfect setup for a fascinating finale episode to see, like, literally everything that we've been like building towards feels like we've taken like a million steps backwards. And so it's gonna be so fascinating to see, how does this crew, this team, pick up the pieces. And honestly, not one of the characters comes out with a win at the end of this episode. They are all just
Mm-hmm.
roughing it at the like every storyline has retraced much of its steps to what honestly episode 1 kind of feels like, where everyone's yelling at each other. It is so chaotic. There's so much that's resonant with the vibes of episode 1. And so it makes for a fun curiosity as you go into the finale of, okay, we all make progress and then kind of get knocked down, but who will get up and who will pick up the pieces and figure out how to rebuild? And that is a fun character question as well. So it's the perfect way to set up the momentum as you head into the finale, but then also for the characters, it's going to be so interesting to see how they reconcile all of these rifts that have now formed, where everyone is just like hit rock bottom, truly rock bottom for a lot of them. So I think that is thematically really fascinating as well.
Mm-hmm. And I love that this episode is so short, and you only see the chaos leading up to them opening, but you don't know what happens after. And I think that question mark makes you want to watch the next episode. And I think that that's something that this season does exceptionally well, is creating those stakes and creating those lingering questions that make you want to hit the next one. Like, this show is so bingeable, and I think it's just understanding the media landscape that we live in. Everybody is streaming stuff, and we love to binge shows, and I really appreciate that the way that they've written this doesn't feel gimmicky, it doesn't feel cheap, but it's understanding the situation and then writing really good quality to get people to continue to watch. And I feel like this episode is a great example of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also because it happens so late in the season that we are so invested in these characters and we're rooting for them. We've
Mm-hmm.
seen
Yeah.
them make progress and evolve and get better. And so when things unravel, we're like, no, but this can't be the end of the story. We got to keep going. We got to find out how they they keep going, how they resolve all of these tensions that have unfolded. And then I also think it's fascinating to see that a lot of again, we've talked about many times in all of our conversations in this season, how this show pairs people together in each episode to like bring out new sides of them, make for some funny moments, all of that stuff. And it's fascinating that a lot of the pairings of where the tensions happen in this episode are between people that have made progress together, and have had plenty of time in the previous parts of the season to have built trust or built relationship or built a friendship. And it's those that the show is clearly smart enough and has such a vision for seeing, that those are the ones that need to fall apart in this episode. So it's not like Richie and Fack fighting. right? Because that's all fun and games, but the emotional depth of some of the connection that, say, Richie and Sydney have demonstrated, or the way that Sydney and Carmi have built trust, or the way that Sydney and Tina have built trust, or Marcus and Carmi, right? Those are the main four dynamics that we really see change and shift and take a different swing to the other direction. And I think the show is so smart to pair those dynamics that we've already been invested in so far, and not just some like random combinations of people being chaotic together.
And I love that it's not just like one person is being an agent of chaos. I feel like that's kind of what we've seen at moments throughout the show, where like one person is being chaotic and then a little bit later maybe a different person is being chaotic, but like we're not usually all chaotic at the same time. And in this episode, everyone is stressed for all sorts of different reasons. Everybody is at their worst, and they're all responding out of that place of tension and stress and just not being their best selves. And so I like
Mm-hmm.
that it's all rooted in who they are as people. It's rooted in these characters and drawing on their flaws, which this show has already showed to us, or is drawing on their circumstances that they are walking through that they can't help but bring into the kitchen. So it just all
Mm-hmm.
feels so real and
Yeah.
normal, and I think that's what makes it so exciting to watch.
Mm-hmm. Yep. No, that's so true. The compounding effect of more people being stressed multiplies in a
Mhm.
non-linear fashion into the collective stress and chaos and anxiety that is formed. And I actually watched this episode twice. Like literally the episode finished and I was like, I need to re-experience that all over
Mhm.
again. So I
Yeah.
literally
Yeah.
sat back down and watched the whole thing again, because there's so much happening and you're just kind of like feeling the episode for the first time. And then I feel like the second time I was able to watch and observe the little details so much more. And one of the things that I noticed was that Carmi is the first person that begins to lose his cool at the beginning of the episode.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
you see for a while that Sydney tries to hold it together. Like she, in reflecting, because she just like goes off and absolutely, is the dramatic, one of the big events that the episode ends with, where she decides to quit. It feels like she was a lot more chaotic throughout the entire episode, but actually when I went back to watch, she does try to keep her cool for much longer than I remembered her. And obviously, because she suppressed a lot of that, so that by the time that Richie's pushing her buttons, she just absolutely blows up and it
Mhm.
happens really
Yeah.
fast. But she can hold it together a little bit longer. Her resilience to be able to keep it together and try and remain calm was much more prominent than Carmi's. And it's interesting how the impression by the end of the episode, the first time I watched, was that not being the case. So it's fascinating to see the way that, like, when she gets yelled at by Carmi, then the scene that happens right after that is when she blows up at Richie. And so she almost absorbs and is can't help, honestly, from being affected by the way that Carmi is absolutely losing his shit. And it rubs off on her, and we've been in all of us have been in group dynamics, or been on family vacation or friend vacations or work events or stressful things, where when one person starts to like unravel a little bit, you can't help but get affected by the residual aspects of that. And you can try for as long as you can to hold it together, but we're human beings, and we are in tune with the sensitivities and the people around us. And so when someone else is losing their shit, you really have to hold your ground in order to not get swept up into the whirlwind of that. And uh I feel like this episode is the perfect example of like the multiplication effect of that, and the way that when one person begins to unravel and others aren't able to like stand their ground against that absorbing into the rest of the group, you just kind of fly off the edge, and you see that happen in this episode for sure.
And I love that we've seen Sydney kind of go on her own like leadership journey, because earlier on in the season, when Carmi throws her to the wolves and is so rude and mean to her and just doesn't give her any support, totally shuts her down. And then she starts leading in that very unhealthy way. She, like you were saying, she absorbs what he was doing and then replicates it, even though that's not who she is. And that is not her leadership style. And then for a few episodes, we've seen her leading well and leading in her emotionally intelligent way that she is so good at. And it was something that we've celebrated multiple times throughout the other episodes. And so then this feels like we're returning to that previous episode where Carmi is being awful to her, and she can no longer operate in the way that she is operates at her best, you know. So we can see she's under stress, and so all of that EQ just kind of goes out the window, and she just starts reacting, which again is just such a human thing to do. You know, when we're not at our best, we all screw up. And so I love that her actions, same thing with Carmi, same thing with Marcus, like they are all things that we've seen them improve on throughout the previous episodes. And then in this one, when all the stress comes, all of that progress just falls flat, and they lose it. And again, it's just so human, which I think makes this show so very interesting to watch.
Yeah, no, that's so good. That's so good. And I think one of those like little details that I feel like is so representative of the way that we as human beings like respond to difficult things and react in situations is when the beginning of the episode starts with Sydney. It starts with the review where it's revealed that the person that Sydney gave the risotto to was actually like a food critic and was raving about it, and you can sense that there's tension now between her and Carmi, and because partially they're in the kitchen, but also partially they don't have like time to like really hash it out. He just tells her like, no, we're fine. We're good. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. And she can obviously, because her EQ is very high, can sense that like he is not good with it. But they're like, okay, we don't have time to like hash this out right now. And I love that when Carmi is losing his shit because all the orders are flying in, and he's upset with Sydney, it comes out in this line where he's like, I told you that dish wasn't ready. And it comes out of left field, but it feels so accurate for the way that we as human beings will like harbor things and like we're not ready to talk about them yet. But then in a fit of, like emotion, it just comes out. It comes like overflowing out. And then you see her react to that of like, oh, okay, like we had this whole conversation earlier, and like now you're throwing this. Where did that come from? I think she says. So I thought that was so accurate to the way that, because it was not fully resolved and processed through, and they weren't able to connect and like reach mutual realization and understanding with that in a fit of emotion, that stuff will come out, and it does, and that's so accurate to the way that we as human beings operate.
And I think it's so great that the show leads her to quit at the end. I love that choice. I think it makes so much sense for this character and where she's at, because we started out this season questioning, like, why is Sydney even here? Like, this does not make sense for her to be putting herself in this situation. And I love that throughout the season, we've seen her communicating with Carmi and dreaming with Carmi about what this place could be and what they could build together and what their partnership could look like and what they could do with this restaurant. And they were starting to get into a rhythm. And yet she realizes, nope, this actually isn't it. And our dreams of running a kitchen differently are not going to come to fruition if you're going to be harboring these things, if you're going to be throwing these things in my face, if you're going to be yelling at me like all these other chefs had before. Like, I can go get yelled at and make more money doing it. And so I just love that Sydney is so self-aware, and she is willing to set up those boundaries, and she's willing to walk away and say, in a way of saying, this is not okay. Even if she messed up, whatever, that doesn't matter. Like, she is drawing a boundary and saying, I'm done. And I loved that. I was like, yes, you go, Sydney. You deserve better than this. You walk away. So it's such a good cliffhanger to set us up for the next episode, but I feel like it's also such a cool character moment for this young woman who is willing to really show what she will and will not put up with.
Yeah, that's so interesting. That's so fascinating. I'm intrigued to see where they take that next because she shows so many like other sides of her in this episode, and she's clearly you can sense that it's not it's about this dream and this job and this crew that her and Carmi have hopefully been stewing together. But I feel like you also see her operating out of hurt a lot more in this episode, and uh some of the ways that she like goes for the jugular with Richie, you know, like clearly it's also her identity as a chef of not feeling valued here as well, on top of all the ways that Carmi's like blaming her for the to-go orders being opened and all of them flooding in and whatnot. There's that aspect, and I think there's also this like personal aspect for her of like I didn't feel recognized, I didn't feel seen, I didn't feel like my craft was able to be nurtured here, and there wasn't that sense of like encouragement for her and her dish. And I feel like a lot of that was those seeds and those like roots are planted actually in like episode 6 and episode 5, you know, and finally we get to see all of that come together here. But I think just the way that she kind of lashes out feels like it's clearly like a person that's hurt beyond just being frustrated with a situation. It's more, there's more to it than that. She really goes for the jugular with some of the stuff she says to Richie and throwing his dot in his face and all that kind of stuff. Where I was like, oh, this is running deep for you right now. Like you're feeling lots of feelings right now, and they're beyond just, you know, having a stressful day at work. And I think that also contributes to her decision to want to just run and leave.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That stuff with Richie gets really ugly. and
Yeah, I was like,
and we've talked about
girl.
Richie before. Like he is so good at instigating and just continuing to
Mhm.
poke and prod, and he can tell like both of them are so good at reading people, and when they're at their worst, that becomes just toxic fuel for the other's fire. And that's really what we see in this episode.
Mhm, mhm. And it just is such a great payoff uh to see that like arc, because one of the most tender moments that we get in the entire season with Richie is in the car with Sydney, episode 2, way back in the beginning of the season, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And so this just feels like
Yeah.
that's been flipped on its head, but it's also because they've had that connection and that moment in the car where he shared a little bit more with her that she's able to use that in the situation against him and when things are heated. And so I mean, what a perfect example of the way that like the people that know you the best are also able to hurt you the most. But also I think it's a testament to just how much they do like have, as much as neither of them will ever admit or say it, and things get more rough for their relationship throughout the season, like uh there's a unique connection that they have with each other that I feel like gets an interesting arc. Like we almost start on a high and now we're ending on real low. And for most of the last couple episodes, like we see their relationship getting worse and they're just like on each other's backs all the time. But it's a reverse arc from some of the other relationships that happen where that grow and now are also kind of flipped on its head as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Probably the most notable of those is Sydney and Tina and their relationship, and
Yeah.
uh,
Okay, but Tina
what
is
a
a
journey they've
champ.
been on.
But
Yes.
Tina is a champ in this episode. My gosh. I she is arguably the one that stays the most calm in this episode, and is the one that even when someone else is, you know, coming for her, she chooses kindness. And it's a great, again, continuation of a previous thread line where Sydney was the one to show her kindness when she was being a jerk to her, right? And so Tina is now able to give that moment back to Sydney to create space for her to feel and let things out and kind of, for lack of a better word, be her punching bag in a lot of ways. Like Sydney lashes out and takes out a lot of her emotions on Tina, and Tina just calmly says, like, you don't need to be yelling, like that's not you. And she kind of calls her into who she is, and back to that identity of like, this isn't you, like this is not you, like we know you, and calling her into higher. And I love the other little detail in that scene where Tina still calls Sydney chef in that scene, which, as we
Mm-hmm.
talked about earlier, is such a meaningful, like, packed with meaning in that little detail. And even when Sydney's yelling at her, she still chooses to call her chef and show that level of respect, which is really great because everybody else is freaking out at each other. So it just, Tina's light shines so bright in this episode.
Well, and I love that Tina calls Sydney chef and she still calls Carmi Jeff. And I think that that is super interesting. Like,
Uh,
obviously, it's funny when she's calling him Jeff, but like, she understands the importance of the word chef, and she is still
mhm.
deliberately choosing not to call Carmi chef. And I love that little detail. She still has that spiciness to her, even as we're seeing those more like soft and kind sides of her.
Yeah.
And I just really appreciate that Tina is, I mean, obviously she's coming into this very stressful environment, but she is bringing her stress with her too. Like, she is late to work because her son was causing
Mm,
trouble and got suspended. And so now she had to bring him to the restaurant as a last ditch effort to, like, somebody straighten out my kid. And then she walks into this madness and is working and trying to take care of like her fellow teammates and all of that. Like, the the grace and the kindness that Tina shows in this episode is just stellar. She is dealing with
mhm,
her own stuff, and yet she remains focused on the work. It's incredible.
mhm,
Go Tina.
mhm. Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, one of the only humans that has remained calm in this entire scene
Hmm.
of chaos.
Yeah.
Let's talk about one of the other characters that I've been really intrigued to see how this arc is going to play out, and that's Marcus. So Marcus is in his own little Narnia at this point. He's in his own world, and it's funny because in a previous episode early in the season, I think it's episode 2, where he goes over and helps Sydney clean up the veal stock, and just does so in such a tender and emotionally sensitive way. Homeboy's EQ has been clouded by his obsession with this donut that apparently is very
Hmm.
good. Which I also love that little detail
Yeah.
at the end of Carmi being like, "Wow, like yes, very impressed," but also, "Dang it, Marcus," like, uh, we get kind of this two sides of this arc. One is his emotional state. The other is the donut turned out really well. Like, so we got a win, and then we got a little bit of a regression, and we will figure out how that will get resolved. But that dual path, I think, is also really interesting for Marcus's arc that actually now has two little mini arcs underneath the overall arc. It's really fun.
And what I love what we see from Marcus in this episode is that I think it was episode 5 where he was screwing around with his other stuff and he tried to rush and make the cakes, and then that's what like shorted out the power, and that's when he told Carmi, I'm never going to do that again. And then Carmi was like, hey, shit happens. And so then the next episode, Marcus is trying to
Mm,
be perfect and meticulous and trying to make sure that he doesn't make those mistakes again, and he's almost overcompensating with his perfectionism and his obsession. And then we see in this episode that he essentially makes the same mistake that he did a couple episodes ago by not focusing on what he needed to focus on, and he got his perfectionism going in the wrong direction.
mhm.
And so I love that he tried to solve the problem and he tried to course correct, but he kind of course corrected in the wrong direction and then ended up making the same mistake again, which is so human. Like, we do
Mhm.
stuff like that all the time. We're like, yes, I'm going to choose a better way and I'm going to devote myself to making better choices. And then we kind of do a little bit better, but also kind of make the same mistakes
Slightly off
again.
still.
Yeah, it's so interesting for that character, but it also reveals that thing that the show is so good at in just reminding us of human nature and
Mm.
helping us to empathize with these characters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's so good. That's so good. And I also think it's so smart for the show to have the two people that freak out at Marcus is Sydney and Carmi. And they are the ones that have been
Mhm.
his encouragers and his inspiration for this journey for him of growth and refining his craft. Like we've seen in previous episodes how much Sydney's been like, okay, let's figure out what equipment and appliances you need. Like we're going to make space for you to be able to explore this. And we've seen Carmi like inspire him and really encourage all of that talent in him. And I think it's an interesting just representation of how difficult sometimes it is to be a leader, where you want to encourage those passions and exciting things that your team is working on, and yet also sometimes things just need to get done, and that's when the rubber meets the road as far as how do you balance both of those tensions really well. And when both of them freak out at him, it's in a time where they're like, Marcus, I just need you need to do your job, right? Like there's a moment where Sydney's like, where are the cakes? Marcus, don't, like, why are you still working on that thing? We've got things that need to
Mhm.
be delivered, and so
Yeah.
that tension between like utilitarianism and practicality of like we need to run a business well, and then also for the person, where are their passions, and then how do these things fit together? Sometimes they're really aligned, and sometimes there can be in tension with each other, and then how do we gracefully manage that interesting tension point? And I feel like you see over the course of the past couple of episodes the way that they do some of that well, and then when there's all of these mixed dynamics, all of a sudden how do we prioritize the person and taking care of the person and not just running the business? And in this episode we all clearly lean towards, oh my gosh, there's like 232 sandwiches, 34 beef, the amount of times Carmi is like screaming out
Yeah.
those numbers. I'm like, that's a lot of sandwiches. I feel the stress too, Carmi. So like, how do you still make space for a human being, but also you just need to get the jobs done? That's a fun tension to figure out.
Well, and it's also so interesting because for the last few episodes, Marcus being in his own little world, doing his donuts or baking his cakes or whatever, doing his dessert thing, has been so peaceful and serene and has almost been like this moment of respite for us in the stressful
Mm.
kitchen. And then we see kind of the drawback of that, because he's just been off in his own little world, and obviously
Mm-hmm.
he's still in the kitchen and can hear the chaos but is not listening to it and is not registering exactly the immense chaotic mess that is happening. And so in the middle of all the foolishness, he comes out with his perfect donut that he's so excited about, that he has been whittling away at for God knows how long, to present to Carmi right when all the shit has hit the fan. And so I think that that's also just an interesting callback, given how much we've spent time with Marcus just being alone. And I think that this episode is kind of a payoff of what happens when one member of a
Mm.
team is so
Isolated.
isolated like that for so
Yeah.
long. They can kind of grow to be out of touch with the rest of the team, and that's kind of what we see from Marcus here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that's so good. And uh I appreciate the way that the show's written his reaction, which is
Oh,
it feels right
yes.
for the character. Like when Carmi absolutely just chews him out for it and is
Ugh,
right
yeah.
up in his face, you don't see him have that explosive reaction the way that Sydney and Richie and Carmi do, or Tina, right? Like he is still steady. He's frustrated. There's a little adorable little shot where he just, whacks his entire sheet pan of donuts on the table out of frustration. But it feels right for that character to not be the person that also immediately becomes explosive. Maybe we'll get that moment later on with Marcus, but not quite yet. And I love that the show knows who this person is well enough to know that that is not how he would react in this situation based on everything that we've seen from who this person is up until now. And I think the other factor that might be significant here is that because, like you mentioned, he's been out of touch, that he's still coming out of like his little world, you know, and so he's getting his bearings. So it just felt so right for the character. And in an episode where everyone's yelling at each other, the show knows that like Marcus is different. He's a different personality, and his reaction should be also different.
And it's still so impactful because you see his face as Carmi is chewing him out,
Mm-hmm.
and like your heart just kind of breaks for him because we all love Marcus. You know, he's just like a big teddy bear, and then you see just his reaction, and then a little while later with the sheet pan, and
Yeah.
that is just so heartbreaking. Like we didn't need words. We
Yeah.
didn't need explosiveness from him. That conveyed everything that we needed to know about how he is feeling and how he is reacting. So again, just that ability to like show us what is going on, because we are intelligent enough to pick up on what that means, especially because I think it was donuts on that tray, and that was
Yeah.
the thing that he has just been devoting himself to and wanting to perfect, and he's spent so many hours just investing in these donuts, and then that is the thing that he slams. And
Yeah.
so it's just so, there's so much meaning in that we pick up on because we're paying attention and we're intelligent people. So again, the show just
Mm.
respects the audience and trusts us to put all these pieces together.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes, and it understands that Marcus's arc, right, for these past couple of episodes, his reaction here actually isn't anger; it's disappointment. It's like the hopes and the dreams that are dashed. It's not his explosive anger towards another character, which is right for some of the other
Mm-hmm.
ones who have clearly exhibited signs and signals and ways of that. That's how they express emotion. No, for Marcus, it's the hopes and excitement that he had that is getting just thrown water on. And that is his arc. So it's different from the other arcs. Yeah, it's so good. It's so good. Can we
And
talk
it's
about Richie
so
getting stabbed?
sad.
Can
Oh,
we
yeah,
talk
yeah, yeah.
about
Let's
Richie
talk
getting
about
stabbed?
Richie stabbing. Yes, that's great.
I mean, of course it's Richie that gets stabbed. There's a line that Carmen yells that's like, "You probably deserved it," and you're just like, "Oh my god."
Right?
But there's this really sweet moment where Ibra is like trying to distract him by telling him about like some like these stories and recollections about the Civil War, and Richie's so invested. It as chaotic and stressful as this episode is, there are these moments of just like tender little moments and humorous little moments that are littered in this episode as well. And I love the way that the show is balanced in that way. Like even the fact that Richie gets stabbed like on the side of his hip, like on his butt, just feels perfect. It's like it's dramatic, but it's not dramatic to the point where like, oh my god, is he severely injured? Like it's not that. It's the perfect amount, most ridiculous way.
It's an appropriate level of stabbing.
But you're also just like, he got stabbed and it's just gushing blood in the middle of an already incredibly stressful series of moments. Like let's throw some more fuel onto this fire, shall we?
Well, and I love that the choice is after he gets stabbed in the butt, then he goes to the front of the restaurant in front of a whole window and then exposes his butt so that Ibra can check out his wound. Like, I don't know. Could there have been a better option? A bathroom where a first aid kit might be, or an office somewhere tucked away? Like, really, we're going to put our butt where passersby can see when they look
Right,
into the restaurant. Again,
right.
it's so fitting
Perfectly
for this
silly.
character too. It makes perfect sense for Richie, even though it's such an illogical choice.
It's also the perfect way for the show to be like, as difficult as these moments are, they're also just kind of silly and ridiculous sometimes. You know, like Carmi is the okay, another wonderful little humorous moment of levity is when Carmi is yelling at the top of his lungs because he needs a dang Sharpie at this given moment, which we all do that, fixate on some small thing that we're not getting what we want and like an entirely disproportionate reaction. You just hear a Fack in the background so quietly, like, Carmi is very mad. I
Ugh,
died. It is the
it's so
wrong
good.
thing to say in this moment, but it's the perfect thing to say for this character. And it just adds that moment of like, if we zoom out for a second, this is all silly and ridiculous. It doesn't feel that way for the characters, but as the passive observer, I'm like, okay, Richie's half naked with his butt hanging out in the beginning, in the front of the store, blood, gushing blood. Carmi can't find a Sharpie. You know, like it's, you kind of just have to sit back and laugh a little bit sometimes when things get really stressful. It's the only way to survive.
Yeah. You're either gonna laugh or you're gonna cry. So we're
Yes.
gonna choose to laugh.
Yes.
But it also is indicative of what this show is so good at is balancing all of these different things. And even though I think this is the most stressful episode we've watched so far, there are still those moments of levity, and we get
Yep.
these little tiny breaths of air before we go
Mm-hmm.
back under the waves of the stress and the chaos. So
Mm-hmm.
even though this is paced a little bit differently, we still have that rhythm, and the show knows when we need a little moment from Fac, or you know,
Yes.
somebody's reaction is so ridiculous that we can't help but laugh. Like, we get those moments in this really, really tense episode, which I think is incredibly impressive because it doesn't negate the tension and the stress and the chaos, but it helps make it so that we can continue watching it without getting too overwhelmed. It makes it so that we
Yeah.
can continue to enjoy being in the kitchen with these characters even when we're stressed like to the max.
Yes. Yes. Exactly. And I think that's what makes this episode, as stressful and chaotic as it is, so fun as well, to be like, oh my gosh, but also there's these moments of just like, yeah, we've all been there, you know. And the fact that I think the show is so smart to have these moments feel so resonant of who we are as human beings, and moments that we've been in ourselves, that sense of resonance and of knowing like, oh yeah, I've done what Carmi's done before, I've done what Sydney's done before, I've had that reaction before. There's a resonance that also makes this episode feel really satisfying, which this episode should not feel satisfying. Nothing about this is a delightful, peaceful little experience, and yet it is satisfying because it feels, it's that the joy of humor, which is like, oh, I'm not alone in that. Someone gets it too, and we have all been there before, and that makes it feel exciting to experience, as stressful as it is. So I thought that detail in the resonance of how these feel like such human reactions is so significant to this episode working as a whole, and feeling so thrilling as we head into the next episode and the finale.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does a great job of showing that for a show to be great, you know, you need all of these different components working together very well. This is one of, I think, one of the best shot of the entire
Yeah.
episode. I mean, it's a continuous take. This is incredible.
Yeah.
But then, and one thing that I love is that the showrunner wanted to make sure that they weren't just doing it to show off or to be gimmicky, but like that filming it in one continuous take actually contributed to the plot. And I feel like this does. And so I feel like this episode is just firing on all cylinders, and you see the way that the characters are constructed is really paying off here. The smartness and the intelligence of the dialogue and the way that this is written, and then you have the great technical components, you have the great
Mm-hmm.
performances. Like, this is one of those episodes that just absolutely sings, and
Yeah.
everything comes together in a whole chaotic mess. But it's one, because we've built up so much empathy with these characters and we can see ourselves in these characters, we're happy to be in this little, you know, whirlwind of a shit show for 20 minutes, and
Mm-hmm.
then we can breathe once it's over, and that's really nice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's so true. And we haven't even gotten to talk about like, how did they film this in creating that sense of like a cramped space and the chaos of human bodies moving back and forth in every direction. Just the, I mean, we talked about the blocking in, I think it's episode 1, of the way that that is shot in this small kitchen, let alone an 18-minute long one take of arguably like the amount of space that this covers and the way that the camera is whipping around. And I don't even know how they, from a technical perspective, are able to get like mics and sound equipment and cameramen to like not be in frame, and making sure that it's like this perfectly executed choreography. Like, this is impressive. I also read that they made this decision to do a one take shot like 2 to 3 weeks before they were going to film it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this is also not like a, we have had months to like really stage this and practice and like think about the meticulous details and really nail it. Like, they went with it, and the level of commitment to do it this way, and just all the technical like details and like the strategic part of how to carry this out, I can't even imagine. It's amazing, absolutely amazing, and really does pay off for all of the reasons that we talked about earlier. But just even from a like execution perspective, well done, really well done.
Yeah. So big shout out to the entire production team, all of the camera men, like all of that. Like, wow, what an incredible accomplishment this episode is.
Yep, yep, yeah, iconic penultimate episode, man. So good, so good.
Yeah.
All right, any other thoughts about this episode before we give out some awards?
Another aspect of this episode that I really love is that, and we talked about it a little bit, I think, in the previous episode, but this is so rooted in Chicago and the identity of Chicago. So this whole episode starts with
Mhm.
showing us different neighborhoods and different iconic locations and intercutting snippets from history, and it's this showcasing of the neighborhoods and the people, and not like the touristy stuff, but the actual Chicagoans who are there day in and day out. And I just love that this show is so intentional
Mhm.
to really honor this place and highlight it in a way that I think makes a lot of sense, and helps kind of also inform what this restaurant is and who these characters are. Like, you can't take these characters and separate them from this place. Like, the place Chicago is
Mhm.
its own character in this show, and I love that we get so much of that right off the bat. And I think that that's so smart, because so many shows, they're set maybe in a city, but it's the plot and the characters and everything aren't directly tied to that place necessarily. But the Bear goes out of its way to really highlight and honor the city, and I love that. I think that that's a great way to make a show.
Yeah, so good. That opening credit sequence and the montage there. But then I love that that theme and that dynamic comes back again in the characters, between that conversation between Richie and Sydney, where Richie's going on about how um, you know, Sydney and basically kind of like they are representatives of that dynamic, and he has this whole thing around like edging out the working man, bus drivers, teachers,
Mhm.
and she's pushing back on it. But that feeling that Richie has feels also like representative of the larger macro stuff, but we're seeing it at a micro level between the tensions between these two characters. And I think it's something that we had mentioned maybe at the beginning of the season when we were talking about this, around like Carmi and Sydney representing like high class industry wealth, and like the culinary arts as a whole can often be snooty and uppity, and Carmi's whole background in the restaurant industry, and how that's such a contrast with what this Italian beef shop represents, and being grounded down to earth, family run, small business, like all of that uh, feels like that interplay and that tension is the show is being a lot more clear and helping juxtapose these things together to show us the connection between them than it was at the beginning of the season. So we're getting to see the show's intentions and kind of meta theses really coming to fruition too. And I love that it's not separate from the characters. It's brought to light in the character dynamics, but not also so literally that it feels like Richie is the representation of X, Y, and Z. It's not that literal, but there is a resonance there that I think is really cool.
Yeah, everything is integrated really well in a way that makes sense.
Yep.
It's so nice.
So good. It's so smart. It's so smart. And
Yeah.
it's not too much too. It's not like preachy and like in your face where they keep coming back to this again and again. We're like, okay, we get it. It's there enough for you to mull on it and think about it and again, the show trusts that you're an intelligent human being. You can process this and run with it yourself. We're just gonna plant some seeds. Y'all do the work. Do the work to think about these things. Yeah.
Yeah. And we can pass if we
Mhm.
don't want to think about that, and
Right.
we can think about something else if we want. There is a whole buffet here for us
Yep.
to just sample as
Yep.
at our leisure.
Yes. Well, I like the use of the food metaphors. They're great. Well
Yeah, yeah,
played.
yeah. Got you.
All right. Well, let's give out some awards, shall we? The first category is Top Chef. Who is getting this award this week?
I am going to give this to Ibra for examining Richie's stab wound on his butt. And like not even flinching. Ibra was not
I
phased
know.
at examining this man's butt. And I think that deserves an award.
That does. That really does. Just the readiness to dive in. My
Yeah.
award is actually to Ibra as well, but it's for calming Richie
Yes.
down, which just seems like
Mm-hmm.
a quite a feat to do. And I think, the fact that they immediately jump into that little like bit is just so sweet too, because that they've done that a million times before with, I'm sure, the plethora of kitchen wounds that have ensued from knives and cutting things and being around hot stoves and whatnot. And they kind of had this like rhythm together where they both knew what the dynamic was and kind of stepped right into that. And I thought that was really kind of sweet too, to feel like this is not even just the first time he's been able to calm Richie down, but he's been able to do it a million times before with his very specific stories around the Civil War, which apparently is the thing that'll do it for Richie.
Yeah, yeah. I was like, of all of our conversations that we're going to have while examining a stab wound, I didn't expect a history of Somalia to be top of that list. But you know what? Mad respect. I
Yes.
liked it. You get wound care and some world history.
Yeah.
What more could you ask for?
Yeah, and it's just fascinating that of all people, Richie would be the one to like really find that so soothing for him. You know,
Yeah,
a
but he
true
was focused.
intellectual. Yes. All right. The next category is achievement in chaos. Who or what is getting this award this week? Got many
Yeah,
submissions, I'm sure.
many. I'm gonna give this to Carmi for eating a donut off of the floor.
Yeah, when he's crouched over there for a hot second and kind of pauses, and
Hmm.
you're like,
Yeah.
why? Oh my, he's gonna do it. Yep, there he goes. There he
Hmm.
goes. Oh, and it tastes good. All right, win for Marcus. Thank God. Here we go. Yeah, but it's also a really great little like seed to plan for what's gonna happen in the next episode when they see each other again. Like how it's
Hmm.
gonna play out. That's a great one. My choice for this award is going to The Bear season 1, episode 7. Just the entire
Nice. Yes, I love it.
all right, the next category is spiciest line. Who is getting this award and for what thing that has come out of their mouth that they've said?
Yeah, I gotta give this one to Sid. When she says to Carmi,
Oh,
"You are an excellent chef. You are also a piece of shit."
yes. Yeah. And she's like calm in a way that is terrifying. When people should be very
Yes.
serious, but they're calm, this is not good.
Yeah.
This is not good. It's very eerie. It's very terrifying. And she has already blown up, and you sense
Yeah.
that there's so much more there. And she says that with such clarity and such an even tone.
Hmm.
Oh, yeah. That cut straight through. I'm giving this award to Fack for his Carmi is very mad. Just
It's so
oh,
good.
you know that
Yeah.
person that says the wrong thing at the wrong time and has not read the room, and it's so endearing because he is such an innocent
Mhm.
and like naive and just he's just like happy to be here type of guy, you know, and you can't blame him for not having the EQ to recognize what is happening in this moment right now. So it was great. It was a great character moment. Great moment of levity for the show. Loved it. I cracked up.
Oh, it's so good. And it comes at just the right time too.
Yeah,
And
right
I
after the
love that we're transitioning from one moment of chaos to another moment of chaos. And
yeah.
that little line, those like four words are the bridge between these two really
Yes.
chaotic. It's so good.
Well, and you also don't see him say it either. Like there's no
Yes.
shot of him
Yeah.
saying it. It's just you his voice is so distinct. It's kind of quick. It's kind of buried amidst all of the like clanging pots and pans and stuff. And so when you really you catch it, it's a great little nugget. Very delicious. All right. Well, looking ahead as we head into the finale, what are you excited about? What do you want to see next?
I'm so excited because there are a few things that have been seeded throughout this season that are going to pay off in the finale. And I'm
Okay.
so excited to see those things and to
Wow.
get to talk about those things.
All
It's going to be a
right.
great time.
That was a great trailer. That was very good.
Thank you.
Good
Thank you.
job.
You got to come back. You got to watch the next episode. You got to come back to the podcast.
You've really
Episode 8.
whet my
Oh,
appetite, you know?
good.
uh, I just have two things jotted down here. My first bullet is so now what? Which is kind of how I feel
Mhm.
for like every character and every dynamic. Like we could go any possible direction for
It's
like
true.
how this is gonna get resolved, which I think is the perfect again, iconic penultimate episode is like basically just unravel everything that you've built up the entire season and your audience is invested to know what happens next because they've been on this journey. But two, like something has to happen. We will see how they will resolve, reconcile, not reconcile, fight some more, maybe, probably, before we get to see a little bit more of a momentary closing of this season as we head into the next one. The second thing that I have jotted down here is the envelope is still there. It's still there. Its presence is looming. And I think surely it should come up in the next episode, I would think. You can't put an unopened envelope that the viewer has not seen before and not expect that we are going to be waiting to find out. And it feels like the finale would be a great spot for that to come up again and maybe blow some shit up. So I feel like that's going to rock the boat in some way or another. And I think that'll be significant. So I'm hoping to see an envelope get opened and read by somebody. That's all I want.
We will see what happens. We got to watch the next episode.
Uh huh. Mm-hmm. All right. Any other last thoughts before we wrap? Hit them all.
I think so. I This show is just great.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's while I was watching this episode, I just kept like, this is great. This is so good. I'm so impressed. This is amazing. Like I've run out of positive adjectives to describe this show.
We'll pull up a
Uh
thesaurus. Yes.
yeah, it's
Synonyms
fantastic.
for phenomenal. Yeah.
Yes. Just insert all of those here.
Yeah. Yeah. My one last thought comment was I appreciate that this show knows to do a 20-minute episode and does not feel the need to do more, um, either because it then feels a little bit bloated. And part of what makes this episode so great is that it's such a compact chunk of tension and stress and anxiety and chaos that when you extend it a little bit longer than it needs to be without throwing something else in there or whatnot, like it kind of the air goes out of the balloon a little bit. And I love that the show knows that actually making it really compact creates more of that sensation. And then use that time in the next episode to do what you need to do to like recover, rebuild, figure out the pieces, and then reconstruct this whole group dynamic all over again. But to know and trust that we can do this in a compact way and we don't need to fill time just to hit a 30-minute episode number because we did the rest of the season as 30-minute episodes. I just love that. I love the awareness and willingness to commit to that. So
yeah, again, it's that trust that I feel like the show is built up in knowing, we know if you're about to walk into a 20-minute episode that the episode needed to be 20 minutes. If we're walking into a 40-minute episode, we know that the episode needed to be 40 minutes. And so I love the way that this show has really proved that it is trustworthy. And again, it respects the intelligence of the audience and also respects our time too. Like, it's not just adding in fluff here, but it's telling the story the appropriate way in the appropriate amount of time. And it's just that intentionality and that level of detail is very much appreciated.
Yep. So good. All right. Well, this was our review and discussion of episode 7 of The Bear Season 1. You can find it available to stream on Hulu. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of TV and Us. Our name sums it up. We're big fans of TV and the powerful ways we can connect with each other and the world around us. This podcast is about all of us and our shared stories, so everyone is welcome here. And we're so glad you hung out with us today as we continued our journey through The Bear Season 1. And we're getting close to the end of the season, y'all. You can subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you tune into your favorite shows. Drop us a rating and review letting us know your thoughts about episode 7. You can connect with us on Instagram and Twitter at MoviesAndUsPod or email us at moviesandUsPod@gmail.com. We will be back very soon to discuss the finale of The Bear Season 1. We're so pumped. Going to be lots of exciting reveals. Sarah's given us a great trailer of what's to come. Lots of exciting things I'm sure that we will need to dive into together in our next episode. So stay tuned for that. We hope you have an amazing week, and we'll talk again very soon.